When you think small Canadian business, what comes to mind? Maybe a local cafe or a little gift shop that sells unique items you can't seem to find anywhere else. The truth is, small businesses are Canada's economy. They make up 98% of employer businesses and span every sector. That's according to a 2024 statistics report from the federal government. But with fewer resources, they need to do more with less. Enter AI. TD recently asked small business owners how they're using it. Nearly half said for marketing. Others use it for research, data analysis, even turning meeting notes into insights. One TD client, an interior designer, went from skeptical to sold when AI transformed her sketches into photorealistic renderings. I'm Grant McDonald, and on this episode of the Banking on AI podcast presented by TD Invent, we sit down with Andrew Braun, Associate Vice President, Remote Channels and Distribution Strategy here at TD, where we dig into how small businesses can use AI now, the risks to watch for, and how TD clients are already seeing big results. Andrew, first off, thank you so much for being here today. I'm really interested in the conversation that we're going to have. I'd love just to start off with, what your role looks like at the bank, what it looks like for small business clients, and then we can dive in a little bit deeper to the world of AI.
That sounds great, and thank you for having me. I feel really fortunate because my role at the bank, at least part of it, is to think about the future for business banking and for our small business customers. And so what that looks like is I work within the bank and within the teams to consider what business banking could be in the future, what our customers might need, what our colleagues might need, and think about that from a strategy perspective, as well as like a capability and a delivery perspective. That's where AI comes in as we think about how do we use AI now and how can we continue to evolve AI in our business to deliver for our customers. And then another part of my role, which I'm very fortunate to have, is I have direct connection with the customers. I have teams that support customers from their onboarding and when they have inflection points in their business. And so the great part about that is you get direct feedback of what they're thinking about, what they're worried or they're considering in their businesses, as well as what their opportunities are. And when you hear that, then you can incorporate that back into what are we thinking about from a strategy perspective or from an implementation perspective that will help them. And so it's super exciting. I feel very grateful. But that's a little bit about my role.
I like it because it's interesting to talk about strategy, and there's a lot of great work happening across TD. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're always interacting with clients. So you have best of both worlds here, where you're able to see here on the ground what is needed, what does it look like, how do we strategize to focus on what is needed. So when we think about the AI journey and your thoughts on it in the past, was there kind of a moment where you're like, this makes sense, and I think that we can do a lot with it?
I think there's a few moments, Grant. Like the first moment for me, I just moved to Toronto from Vancouver, and I was doing a role in risk strategy and credit risk. And so we had just acquired Layer 6, and we started to really kind of explore machine learning and what could that mean for us? How could that help us deliver better risk decisions, better credit decisions, better experiences for our customer and our client and our colleagues. And so that was the start of the thought process. And at the time, there was a lineup, a queue to get that capability. And so I was thinking, okay, we'll be able to have that, over time, and that'll be great. And then there was sort of a next inflection point for me, which was the pandemic. And in the pandemic, everything got uprooted for our clients. Our clients had, in an overnight moment, had their businesses shut down, their livelihoods impacted, their employees. They had a ton of stress going on for them. And so in that moment, we knew that they had this stress. We saw it out there in the market. And we also knew that we were working with the government to implement a program. It was the Canada Emergency Business Account. But we knew we had something we had to overcome, which is we had some elements of the business that we would have to move at a more rapid pace than maybe we had before. And so we stood up a digital front door or digital application capability, which we hadn't done before. So that was new. But I think the thing that looks like AI was, I would call it pre-agentic AI. We needed to be able to fund loans at a pace and scale that we never had before. And we delivered this in really short order because we knew our customers needed it. Um, and within a few months, we had funded, and this may sound outlandish, Grant, but we'd funded about 8 years worth of loans, and a few months later, it was
That is
about 10
unbelievable.
years worth of loans. Yeah, it was unbelievable. And then that program basically allowed customers to increase the loan again. So then we got to do that again. But the kind of a funny anecdote in that process was, the banks work on business days, right? So business day one is Monday, and we'd been funding all weekend to ensure our clients had money. And we got a call on Monday night. I can remember it very clearly. We got a call from our tech team, from our loan team, because they were really worried something was wrong with the loan system, because had all these like alarms going off. Right, we'd broken the loan system basically, and so we had to reassure them it's fine. This is fine. This is just because we've enabled this capability to deliver. And so that was like step two. And then the third one really, it kind of follows in a process. Soon after that, that same loan program had the ability to get forgiveness. And so we knew as we got closer to the date of that, these customers had to pay off this certain amount of the loan to gain the rest of the loan as forgiveness, that um, a lot of them were still struggling. And while they had good businesses and they had a good track record, and we knew they were good clients, they would struggle to gain that forgiveness. And so we were able to go back to that machine learning that I talked about earlier and build out a process so that we could pre-approve tens of thousands of customers, and really support a ton of them to get that loan forgiveness. And so when you think about all that and you think about the impact, like, those are the things that when I think about my journey, you can start to then visualize what a small business can do with that capability as it comes down.
W-
So
I think it's fascinating because you're talking about a lot of time we talk about AI. People want to know the future and what can it do, and what you just gave such tangible examples of a small business owner, and you need money. Like, that is probably the most stressful thing for a business owner. Like, is this going to be able to continue? And you talked about it in a way that is all about speed, all about simplicity. So when you're looking broader picture at AI, small businesses, and this is always hard to pinpoint like a game-changing moment for them, but are there a couple moments that stand out when you're talking with clients and saying, this can be something quite significant for you if you do it the right way?
yeah, I think there's like, and it really depends on the business, right? Like, but I think there are a bunch of game changers for small business owners. But I think we need to stop and think about that small business owner. And I talked about that stress a moment ago. Um, that stress is there, that it was amplified in the pandemic, but small business owners wear a lot of hats. They are the HR department. They are the number one salesperson. They might be the manufacturing department. They take care of legal and finance. The outsourcing. They've got people working with them, but they are thinking about those things all the time. And so, as small business owners consider that, and they think about AI, what AI enables them to do is take some of that mental load off,
Mm.
or be able to extend themselves so they can do more than they could before. And both are valuable, because either or saves time for a business owner, and time is really so important for them. And so examples of that would be like if they have repetitive tasks they can automate, that they have either themselves or maybe an employee doing, and then be able to deploy that a different way, is powerful. Content creation, marketing, personalization, as they think about how do they address their clients and deliver for them. Other ones that are really tangible. If you're scaling your business and you need to hiring can be a difficult process. But if you can use large language models or some of the other tools out there to go through resumes quickly, identify great candidates, get the right type of candidate for your position, then it enables you to focus on what you really want to do, which is continue to grow the company. And so that's, some of the more tangible, immediate ones. But another one that we talked about strategy earlier, right? And a lot of times a small business owner, it struggles to find the time to think about strategy. And then, in some large organizations, that you'll have an advisory board, or you can bounce ideas off others to try and figure out where you want to go and develop a really coherent strategy. And in some instances for small business owners, they don't have the time to do that. And so AI can also do is start that process. They can bounce ideas off their AI advisory board, call it, and they can start the process to build out a strategy for their business that will help them scale or do whatever it is they're looking to do within the business, within their market. So I think there's lots of game changers for small business, and that's definitely not an exhaustive list, but those are some of the things I think about.
And you touched on it earlier in terms of the idea of all of the great stuff that is happening. There's associated risk to a certain degree, which you were able to navigate through that extra stressful time, we can call it. Um, but when you're chatting with clients now, you're saying it can do this, 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 and this. Where are the flags that you sort of raise? Where like, here's some risks to consider, to think about as you approach your next business, fiscal year.
Yeah, I mean, uh, almost nothing is without risk, and so you always have to consider those those downside risks. And so, some of the things that I think about from a risk perspective would be just like data or security risk. So if you are opening up your information to some sort of external vendor, and that could have downstream impacts for your business or your clients, that's certainly one. Another element of risk for using AI is hallucinations or ethical or bias risk, right? And so you have to really understand how you're using it and the outcomes that you're getting. You might need to check that the outcomes are correct. So not taking maybe the face value, the initial risk, or sorry, the initial response. Um, and then another key risk is more like supplier risk that a business operates currently. They'll have supplier risk if you only have one supplier for your main input and that supplier goes away, you have a problem. Well, if you rely heavily on AI, or if it's a very important part of your process and you have one supplier, and as you scale, you may have to start thinking about diversification, or at least acknowledge that you have supplier risk, if you want to call it that, for your AI supplier. So those are some of the risks. So it's not, again, not an exhaustive list, but some of the things that we talk about.
Well, they're important as well because, if I'm using Copilot, I'm using other models, it always comes back to me and I say, what about, mixing nuts and gum? It's a great idea, Grant. I'm like, I don't think that's a great idea. I think I may have to double check that.
That's right.
When you talk about the risk, you talk about what you can consider doing. Where are you telling people to lean in? A lot of the conversations we have on this podcast are about you got to be an early adopter of it rather. Because if you're not, the gap between you and those who are using it's going to continue to grow. So where are you telling clients to lean in?
Yeah, for that, I think it depends on the industry and depends on the business. I think because I think, yeah, certainly early adoption can be really impactful in some businesses, but the other one to think about is how can I deliver it really, really well? How does it really help me as opposed to being a flash in the pan or some flashy object? And the reason I think about that, and this is kind of a more, a large industry type example, but I always think of Apple. And I think I can't think of an instance where they were first to market, but when they got to market, they delivered a really great product, right? And so I think that would be my thought for many businesses is that, yes, lean in, practice, try, um, but certainly make sure that it's fit for purpose and it's the right um, delivery of AI for your business, whether it's what business problem are you solving and is it the right one?
Well, certainly no one size fits all. And, thinking of that, you don't have to give away client secrets, but I'm very curious about what you have seen when you're working with clients, like what creativity has been created from them using AI and, pushing for it.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of examples out there, lots of creative ways people use AI. But one that kind of comes to mind and kind of highlights a bunch of things we talked about in this podcast. We actually had this story on TD Stories recently is an interior designer named Jackie. Um, and what Jackie basically interior design, as you probably all know, or if you've experienced, is so it's important that you trust the interior designer, and it's important that you understand their vision and you can really feel what they want to do. And then when you trust them, then you're able to trust them to deliver what they're going to do. And what Jackie has done is she's in many cases, interior designers will, they'll give renderings or they'll give some sort of visualization of what it is that they want to do. And so that's the way she started a business, but she's pivoted it to basically take her renderings and then create photorealistic um, images for her clients, enabling her to really demonstrate how does light look different in this room? What if we change the colors? What do it look like in different times of day? How do I help you understand, as I want to convey my vision, what it really feels like for you? And if you have a question, I can adjust it, and it saves her time, but it also creates a, a vision for her clients that enables her to avoid sort of that more difficult conversation after, where it maybe doesn't match up with the vision, or it is a more difficult project than they want because they're halfway through you changing it. And so I think that's a great example of creativity because it's what she already does, but she's taken this to the next level by just using an AI tool to really help her clients understand and feel what it is that she wants to deliver.
Listen, Andrew, thank you so much for sitting down with us today, having a conversation. It's so interesting to get your insights because you have this world of the future of AI, but also very, very tangible examples as to what your clients are doing with it and where they're going. I always like to ask people who come on the podcast. We have a lot of people listening in the industry that we work in, and I always love to get your insight as to what you'd like to leave them with. It's kind of a final thought, if you will.
Yeah, that's thank you for that. I think what I would want to say is, and it kind of links back to what I talked about a minute ago, is around augmentation. At TD, we're thinking about how to be remarkably human, right? And remarkably can be remarkably powered by AI, and that's kind of how we're thinking about how we deliver in our universe. But I also think that's also in almost every industry what the way they need to think about it as well, because it's there to help our small business owners really find ways to deliver for their clients, and we're going to continue to use it internally to do the same. And I think when you keep that idea of how do you augment the human element to really enhance your client experience, that's kind of the North Star, if you will.
Fantastic. Andrew, thank you so much.
Thank you.